So, let me ask you something. What if the key to a smarter, more engaged classroom wasn't about more collaboration, but about more competition? It sounds a little crazy, right? Well, today we're going to break down a really radical experiment that did just that. It tackled one of the biggest problems in education by having students rank each other's work. It sounds intense for sure, but trust me, the results are probably not what you'd expect.
I want you to think back to your own time in school. Maybe in a big university lecture hall, the professor's up there talking away, but the room is just quiet. Almost too quiet. Why is that? You've got a room packed with brilliant people, but the moment the floor opens for questions or discussion, crickets.
And look, this isn't just some vague feeling we all have. It's a real, well-documented barrier to learning. When students are silent, it means they aren't questioning, they aren't debating, and they probably aren't truly grappling with the material. And that is the exact problem we're going to explore today: the silent classroom.
Yeah, the classic lecture format can kind of turn students into sponges. They just sit there, they listen, and they try to absorb as much as they can. But here's the thing, that's not active learning. They aren't really engaging with the ideas or with each other. They're just receiving information.
And that's exactly where our source material comes in. A study from Sri Lanka zeroed in on this exact issue. They noticed students were really reluctant to speak up, which basically turned lectures into a one-way street. And it was this passivity that they decided to tackle head-on.
So, what was their big idea? What was the cure? Well, it's probably not what you're thinking. They decided to inject a dose of structured competition right into the grading process itself.
They called it competitive-based assessment, or CBA for short. And the core idea is actually pretty simple. Instead of just your professor grading your work, your classmates do it too. But, and this is the important part, they don't just give you a score. They have to rank your project against everyone else's, and crucially, they have to explain why they ranked it that way.
Now, this whole system isn't just about trying to win. It's built on these three core skills. It forces students to compete, to bring their A game. It forces them to compare all the different approaches they see. And it forces them to criticize constructively. It's basically a full workout for their analytical muscles.
So that's the theory. But how did this actually play out in a real classroom? Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the experiment itself. All right, so the scene is the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka. The participants are science undergrads, a mix of second and fourth-year students. The task was pretty standard stuff: get into groups, do a project, and give a presentation. The twist, though, was in how they were graded.
So here's how it worked. After one group presented their project, every other group in the room instantly became an evaluation panel. Their job was to rank that presentation against all the others, from first place all the way to last. But they couldn't just throw out a number. Nope, they had to provide detailed, constructive feedback to justify every single ranking. As you can imagine, this forces everybody to pay very close attention to every single presentation.
Okay, this sounds like a pretty high-pressure situation, doesn't it? So what did the students actually think about it? I mean, did they find it motivating, or was it just super stressful?
The answer was kind of staggering, actually. A massive majority, 83% of the students, were in favor of this new competitive system. I mean, wow, that is a really powerful endorsement. And when you dig into the survey data, you can see why. The results were just so positive. A huge number of students agree that the CBA created healthy competition. And even more importantly, they felt it improved their knowledge, way more than a standard test would have.
And here's the human side of that data, which I think is so telling. This student basically says, look, I wasn't sold on this at first, but then that competitive element kicked in, and it actually pushed them and their whole team to step up their game. It was a powerful motivator.
And what's really cool is that the students felt like they were up to the challenge. More than 80% of them were confident they could ask good, relevant questions and, get this, rank their peers fairly. So they didn't just feel like this was happening to them, they felt empowered by the process.
But, of course, no experiment is ever perfect, right? The feedback wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The students themselves actually raised a very, very important concern.
And here it is, the big worry, coming directly from the students: bias. The question was, could friendships or maybe old rivalries get in the way of a fair ranking? Some students definitely worried that personal feelings, not objective analysis, might be creeping into the scores.
And you know what? The data actually backs that concern up, but with a really fascinating twist. So check out this table. It compares the less experienced second-year students with the more senior fourth years. The second years had a much higher percentage of outlying ranks, basically rankings that were way off from what everyone else thought, and 2 of their final rankings were totally different from the professors. Now look at the fourth years, way more consistent, and they had 0 major disagreements with the lecturer. This really suggests that the skill of evaluating fairly is something you might have to learn over time.
So let's put all this together. What does it all mean? Is this competitive model a huge breakthrough for education? Or is it a system with just too many potential problems?
So it really comes down to a trade-off. On the one hand, a system like this clearly gets students engaged and builds some serious analytical and soft skills. But on the other hand, that potential for bias is real, and it seems like younger, less experienced students have a tougher time staying objective.
But here's the real takeaway, the crucial point. The true value of this whole competitive-based assessment thing might not even be in the final ranking itself. It's in the process. It forces students to become active, critical thinkers who can actually build and defend an argument. And those are skills that are just invaluable, way beyond any classroom.
I mean, it's a pretty wild idea, right? Turning students from passive listeners into active judges of each other's work. And while it clearly has its challenges, especially around fairness, this experiment from Sri Lanka suggests that maybe, just maybe, a little dose of healthy competition could be the cure for the silent classroom. So the real question it leaves us with is, could a little competition be exactly what learning needs?